I do find it very difficult not to tap my fingers along with that music when it starts. So I haven't even got myself squared up yet for the camera. Look at me, fucking professional. Morning, George. Morning, Chewy.
How you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm doing good. We are the earliest we've ever been by a full 60 seconds because there is an announcement today with the Prime Minister about mandates and about what is going to happen. And we are going to take that live. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on the live stream as well. And we will put it out there immediately. So people who are joining us will know what the Prime Minister has said, what is happening with the mandates and beyond. Often she's 3 or 4 minutes. When I say late, I think it's probably intentionally to give media a chance to be ready at 11 o'clock or whatever the time is. So probably in the next couple of minutes, we'll cross live. We'll take a portion of the announcement up until probably when the Prime Minister gives us the details of what's happening with the mandates, then we'll cut out and get back to our amazing content of talking about what's been talked about when people talk about it. George, update on you. How are you doing? Did you do another rat? How are you feeling? I haven't asked you that this morning. I'm sorry about that.
I don't think I haven't done another rat just because I think I've only got a few left. I guess I can get more, but I was kind of surprised. I went to the testing station weeks back and kind of like sort of exaggerated my symptoms because I was worried they wouldn't do it. But I was like the only person there on foot. There was like a car, but I was on foot, and she just gave me a 5-pack.
Yeah.
And sent me on my way. So I imagine I can do that again. So maybe I should be doing it a bit more often because I still do have a slight sore throat and just generally feel like shit. But I think that's just normal, right? So
it's not. It is funny when you wake up in the morning. You start, like I've said 3 or 4 times, when you start talking about it, all of a sudden you go,
yeah.
You maybe it's like as an adult, as a parent who's had young children. Like I always say, as soon as that you find out one of them has got nits, you just innately start. Well, Chewy doesn't, but you innately start scratching your head. Guys, we're going to go to this press conference, all right? Because it's about to start, and we want to find out what's going to happen. And good morning, Chewy. We will get a more update from you in your life shortly. Here we go.
Kia ora koutou katoa. I'm here today to set out the next set of changes to our COVID-19 settings in New Zealand. After 2 long years of living through a pandemic, it's easy to lose sight of how far New Zealand has come. This exact day 2 years ago, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield announced from over at the Ministry of Health that we had 36 new cases of COVID-19.
Wow.
Half at that time were from overseas travel, with the exception of the Queenstown World Hereford Cattle Conference we all remember so well.
We do.
We could contact trace 50 new cases a day back then. We hadn't locked down yet, but the early signs were there. In fact, on the 23rd of March, we reported 2 new community cases, including one in the Wairarapa. I will forever remember that case because prior to that time, we could link the origin of every case to the border. That meant we still felt like we had some kind of control over COVID. But when we learned about the Wairarapa case, we couldn't. I remember asking all sorts of questions, trying to find a border link. In fact, one official asked me if I would like to interview the case myself. I said I would before realizing he was joking. As it turned out, that was indeed the first sign that we had community transmission. Days prior, we had designed the alert level system, introduced it via a live national broadcast from the Beehive, and within days we were in a nationwide lockdown. I've often been asked whether that was a hard decision. In my mind, it was not, because we had no other defence, no other way to protect each other. There was no vaccine, there were no antiviral medicines, there was very little data to tell us which public health restrictions worked and which did not. So we built our own defences and we hunkered down. But those defences were blunt. They were hard and they were always intended to be temporary. Not because we would get tired and want to move on, but because
I'm surprised the Prime Minister's taking quite this long to get to it. History up until this point, she's been very, very quick at getting to the data, but obviously this is the build up to what we have been and what we're going to be.
But it has worked. At the end of the first year of the pandemic, the world had seen 1.5 million deaths, increasing to over 5 million by the end of the second year while vaccines were rolling out. New Zealand successfully eliminated the first wave and recorded the lowest number of deaths of any country in the OECD for 2 years in a row. Our actions saved thousands of lives, and without ever setting out to, New Zealand is now known for our successful COVID response. Putting people's health first was also the strongest economic response. There's no doubt that we are now feeling the full brunt of global headwinds.
So this is the build up to, and rightfully so, how well we've done and why we've had the restrictions to this point and why it's been important and where we've been.
Bloody hard.
And the build up to the headlines talking about how well New Zealand's done and it's now time to take off restrictions. So
there've never been easy options. Everyone has had to give up something to make this work, and some more than others. Not everyone has agreed with the choices and trade-offs that have been made, and sometimes that's had a knock-on effect. I imagine every family has had a difficult conversation with someone in their lives about COVID, about vaccines, about mandates or passes. But in amongst what have sometimes been different opinions, there has been at least one unifying factor. Everyone has been safer, but everyone is also tired.
True.
Everyone is fatigued, and some are worried that means we don't care about each other anymore. I know that is not the case. I still see, hear, and read frequently in the letters I receive that we remain proud of what we've achieved together to date. As one person so aptly put it to me, quote, "We are tired, not sick of each other." That person was right, but we're not tired for nothing. The sacrifices and hard work has brought us here today, and now with more tools and one of the most highly vaccinated populations in the world, we are able to keep moving forward safely.
Okay, so time to tell us about moving forward now. Where are we going, people? We're all waiting for the date. That's what we're waiting for. Here we go. Next steps, please.
And today, it means we can set out those next steps.
Let's hear about it. Come on.
In designing those steps, we, of course, have had to keep in mind that COVID is here to stay. Well, that's not something we get to decide anymore. We do have a choice in how we manage it. So let's start with our current situation, what the future looks like, see what that means for the tools we have in front of us. Now, as you know, yesterday we reported 20,907 new cases with a rolling 7-day average of around 17,000 cases a day. Now, for most people, their symptoms have been minor and they've recovered well at home. For others, less able to fight the virus, it presented a threat to their lives and, if not properly managed, a threat to our health system. Our experts maintain the view that we have peaked in Auckland now and that we should begin to see that reflected in hospitalisation soon, given the lag between the two. And you can see the blue dotted line is the representation.
Well, that's information. That's data. So we've peaked in Auckland.
The view is that the rest of the country, represented by the black dotted line as a rolling 7-day average, will follow Auckland, given the city was the first place to see Omicron seeded and break out. Here you can see the plateau in cases and the expectation that these numbers will continue to decline over the coming 2 weeks. And the yellow line represents the modelling of that proposed decline.
So therefore mandates will stay in place for the next 3 weeks.
What you can also see is a relatively steady state rather than a hard decline, as in the fact that we suspect we will continue to maintain a certain level of cases. Based on the experience of the likes of Australia, we currently predict that we'll have a continuous rolling baseline of potentially several thousand cases a day. We also predict that we will have future spikes, with that being especially likely over the winter season, as we've discussed many times. So that tells us two things. First, with the ongoing presence of COVID in our community, we need to continue to use tools that can keep our vulnerable communities safe, such as those who are immunocompromised and those with disabilities. It also tells us that in times where we see cases grow and pressure then result on our health system, we'll need to act to slow that spread down as much as possible. And there are ways we can do that. whilst also continuing to move forward. That means keeping the COVID-19 protection framework or the traffic light system to help us manage in the future, including, and this is important, new variants. We designed a traffic light system several months ago. Two things have changed since then. We're now dealing with Omicron rather than Delta, which we know behaves differently. We also have more data than we did before, and we can identify which environments are high risk and which ones less so. And thirdly, we have high rates of vaccination coverage. We've used this information to assess all of the components of the traffic light system and to make changes that ensure it's effective, but also allows us to sustain it as we use it in the coming months. Let me start with where we are right now, the red setting. This is the place where case numbers are high and hospitalised admissions are also high, so we pop on the brakes. In particular, we have had measures like a gathering limit of 100 people, which applies to events and hospitality. After analysing our own data, we identified that hospitality, for instance, had a secondary attack rate of 6.7%. That transmission rate is relatively low, and this has been backed up by other research. And so, it is the view of our public health officials that we can safely increase these gathering limits indoors to 200 without having a significant impact on our health system and hospitalisations, especially given we'll maintain our seated and separated rules for hospitality. The second area we have analysed is the difference between indoor and outdoor gatherings, and there is a difference. While Omicron is more transmissible, the natural ventilation of an outdoor setting reduces the risk significantly. At RED, we want to encourage gatherings and events outdoors. They're a way we can come together safely. And that's why, on the advice of our public health team, we are removing all outdoor gathering limits.
Wow.
Sports, concerts, gatherings outside without limit will resume. What remains in use at this level is, of course, masks. I know they are new for us and most people really dislike them for good reason, but they're so critical and one of the ways we can show care and respect for one another, including our immunocompromised community.
Okay.
Research published in the British Medical Journal late last year shows that mask wearing reduces new COVID-19 cases by 53%.
So is that going to be a law, a regulation that we have to wear masks
brings
outside?
me to Orange.
So let's have a
Well,
listen.
you'll remember there are currently no capacity limits, either indoors or outdoors, with the use of My Vaccine Pass. And masks are required indoors with some exceptions, like education. Having no capacity limit remains, but we do want to apply what we've learned. That's why we'll be firming up our gathering guidance for Orange. We know for indoor events, close contact is higher risk. So to help organisers continue to provide the safest possible environments, we're encouraging larger events that are over 500 to either add extra capacity in a venue or provide seating. And finally, green. This is very much an example of the new normal. There are no requirements or restrictions here, but there is guidance, and we'll still be in the system as a way of reminding each other that we need to be on watch, ready to move should we need to. So no changes here. And so, simply put, red means indoor gathering limits and masks. Orange means masks, and greens means guidance. These changes are based on the best available evidence we have right now in real time. We believe they will make the COVID protection framework easier to maintain while also still being very effective. The advice we have, therefore, is that they are changes we can make almost immediately and will come into effect from 11:59 p.m. this Friday, the 25th of March. This does mean from this weekend, sports, outdoor events can all resume and hospitality can increase its capacity, but of course they must maintain the seated and separated rules. You'll remember, though, that there is one element of the COVID protection framework that I haven't talked about yet, and that is the future of vaccine passes.
The only thing we care about.
Given the pandemic roller coaster everyone has been through, it's easy to forget why we use them in the first place. They were first used by countries who were trying to move away from broad-based restrictions as vaccines became available. I remember not being in favour of their use. In fact, I'm on record as having said that. But after several months of lockdown through Delta, it became clear that mandates were needed to achieve vaccination levels required for safe reopening. and that passes had a role to play too. It was a tough call, but mandates and passes were undoubtedly one of the reasons that we reached 95% of the eligible population vaccinated to achieve the near elimination of Delta over summer. But something has changed since we brought them in, and that something is Omicron. In the pandemic so far, we've had more than 500,000 confirmed cases of COVID, almost all of which have been in the Omicron wave. Many cases don't show symptoms, and testing doesn't catch every case. In fact, modelers say that total infections now could be as high as 1.7
George, this sounds
million.
like they're not going to relax the mandates. It sounds like what they're building up to. Sounds like she's about to say, because of the seriousness, we need to keep it in for a while. What do you reckon?
Unvaccinated Kiwis are likely to have had COVID.
I'm cautious,
or well in the future.
All right, we'll keep listening.
Our vaccine pass system doesn't incorporate that into the way it works, but the outcome is the same. We now have 95% vaccinated, plus a number more who will have built some immunity from the illness itself. We said some weeks ago that when we started to come down off the peak, the reason for keeping vaccine passes changes. As this graph shows, that time is nearly upon us. In fact, you can see the predicted decline that ends on the end access, which is for roughly the 5th of April.
Yeah.
And so, from 11:59 p.m. Monday, 4 April, vaccine passes will no longer be required to be used as part of the COVID-19 protection framework.
Nice.
There will be some businesses, events, or venues who may still wish to use them for their own reasons, and they can if they wish to do so. We will maintain the systems in place and update the passes over time to include boosters. But for now, they will no longer be mandated. I say for now, as I will still provide the same disclaimer that every country really.
Let's just pull that backwards there. All right. Okay. So we have information. That was a 15-minute talk by the PM to get to the only thing really anybody cared about, which was what's happening with the mandates. Thanks for you guys who are watching. Thanks to Threads for your comments. You guys who are watching have now heard what has been said. I'll just repeat. I was jotting away while the PM was talking, and I'll repeat it. If you want to share your thoughts on it, feel free to message them through, especially if you're watching on YouTube. It's easy to do. So what I got, George, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that basically 11:59 p.m. this Friday, we're going to go to, I don't think she actually said we're going to go to orange, but it sounds like she was describing orange. We're going to go to an orange light, which is the indoor limits go to 200s, but they must be seated and separate. Outdoors have no limits. Now, the thing that was unclear is the PM said, but we need to keep using masks. I don't know whether that means that's going to be a mandated part of orange. In other words, if you go down and see the Highlanders at the stadium and there's 20,000 people there, does everyone have to be in masks or not? That wasn't clear to me in that conversation. Did you pick up on that, George, at all? Your mic's off, brother.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was unclear whether that was advice or regulation.
So are masks legislated right now?
Well, I mean, it's a question to ask, isn't it? But you can, it's ridiculous. I mean, is it ridiculous? You can report people for and being in breach of these regs.
Oh, so QR codes are also going, by the way. She's just said.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think they are part of the regulation, which is why, for example, a dairy can tell someone to leave for not wearing a mask. If they weren't part of the regulation, then you'd have no right to do that. So it actually needs to be brought in, whether you call it a law or a restriction or a regulation. I'm not sure the exact terminology, but yeah. So we want, so that was unclear. So QR codes are going, but then again, I think people have stopped using QR codes like they were, because at the moment they're not announcing, places of interest and all that anyway. So
yeah, I wanted to bring that up today. Is I suddenly realized, wait, I've probably gone to heaps of places in Dunedin with positive cases. Why am I still scanning in?
That was announced a few weeks ago,
right?
That they weren't going to be announcing places of interest anymore. But here's the big one. Yeah, I think that we're all waiting for. 4th of April. What's the date today? It's the 23rd. So in a couple of weeks, week and a half, which actually is shorter. It's quicker than I thought it would be. I thought it would be, as we talked to the guy from EMA yesterday, that it would be closer to Easter weekend, which is the 17th of April. So that 11:59 p.m. Monday, 4th of April, there would be those mandates are leaving for a vaccine pass.
11:59 p.m. So April 5th.
Yeah. So in other words, cafes full of anti-vaxxers, Tuesday, the 5th of April. That's what's going to happen. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Chewy's there or not, because he turned his camera off. He must have been getting naked or something. We'll just see. Are you with us, Chewy, or are you not with us?
I think he might have had an emergency.
Yep, that's all good. We'll leave him there, and we'll wait till the camera comes back on to bring him back in. Now, one of the things that is interesting is the Prime Minister also saying that if businesses wanted to, they could still continue to use the vaccine mandate. So therefore, on Tuesday, the 5th of April, you could walk up to a business and they could still require you to show a vaccine pass. Now, I reckon that's problematic. I think that's going to cause more conflict than anything else, actually. Because, there's already, like, I was at the dentist yesterday, and I was coming out of the dentist's office, and I was on the 5th floor, and I was coming in there. I was about to get into the elevator, and there was 2 older people in there who didn't have masks on, and the lady went, "Oh, we don't have masks on," and I just went, "I'll just let you go." And then the husband went. I could hear him as the doors were shutting of the elevator. I was like, "What did you say that to him for?" And I just got the vibe that was like he was a bit like, "I don't know, we don't have to fucking explain ourselves to anybody. We don't want to." And so that kind, I'm making an exaggerated assumption of these people, but those people are out there. If they turn up to a cafe or restaurant or whatever, and they say, "Can I see your vaccine pass?" They'll be like, "Get fucked. We don't have to have vaccine passes right now." And they'll go, "But the Prime Minister said we could if we wanted to." And they'll go fuck yourself. Call the cops. Serve me. I'm not going anywhere. Like, I think that kind of has the potential for quite a lot of conflict. No. Chill, you're back with us. Did you get most of what the PM was saying there?
Yeah, I caught the end of it. Just someone at the door at the absolute worst timing. I think you're bang on about like require it or don't require it.
Yeah.
By not requiring it, you're putting it onto the frontline workers. And I don't want to be in that situation. I've been in it a few times with masks. I don't want to be doing it for anything else.
So tell us then, actually, I'd be interested in your thought. If someone walks in to the place where you work, the retail outlet where you work, and they're not wearing a mask, what do you do out of interest?
So over this, I've worked at 2 different businesses, and they had a very different approach to both of it. In my current one, the language that we use is quite helpful. It's, did you need a mask if they walk in without one? And 9 times out of 10, someone's forgotten it in the car, and they're very appreciative of getting a new mask. I've had one guy just explode at me once of like, "Don't you fucking tell me what to do," all of this sort of stuff. But we're also a critical sort of thing, so we can't turn people away. So that becomes awkward to manage. It's a bit of distance. It's making sure they're not close to other customers, etc. In the previous place that I worked, it was very much we don't want to provoke a fight. So literally ignore it.
All right. So if someone just walked in without a mask on, nothing would be said literally at all.
Pretty much. We had a security guard. He kind of took the view of, I'll at least mention it.
Yeah.
But the attitude from, I guess, head office was more, we're not here to fight with our customers. We're not here to ruin the experience. A lot of the people that I work with took that as, well, we don't matter.
Yeah. Wow.
So it was all about maintaining distance. And I remember in the early days of lockdown, me just to force the issue, I was keeping 2 meters away or 1.5 meters away from people. And if they stepped closer, I would step back. I remember a customer basically pushing's the wrong word, but I ended up retreating halfway down the store because they kept on
Right.
stepping closer to me to talk to me
Right.
without a mask on.
Right. Like a beautiful dance, a 2-meter wide dance.
Yeah.
Doing this around
Yeah.
the store.
And I was just like, when is this person going to realize that, that I'm stepping back every time they step forward? Yeah.
And that, I mean, we talked a bit to the EMA rep yesterday, and I know it's not the same thing, but he was talking about sort of self-regulation by businesses when it came to this sort of thing. And what I hear you saying, Chewy, on some level, is when that business that you were working for them self-regulated, meaning we will decide not to put a, we will put in place that we won't challenge them. What they're actually doing is they're regulating their sale over their employees. Because they're going, I'd rather this person came in and bought a widget costing $150 than my employees were safe and comfortable. And that's the problem when businesses regulate themselves. Now, this is almost the flip side, as you can see on the screen as well. This is the press conference live. Obviously, the PM's taking questions at the moment. Vaccine pass is no longer required from April 5th. As we said, that was the only thing people wanted to know, as is seen by the Herald here, because it's the only headline they've put up, that you're now asking businesses to regulate safety over dollars. So you're asking the cafe to go, you know what, we'd rather keep our people safe by keeping the vaccine passes in place. So if you're just joining us, what the PM has said is, come April 5th, vaccine passes will no longer be required, but if business wants to keep them, they can. So therefore, if Cafe X wants to keep them in place because they want to do the opposite of what we just talked about with Chewy and keep their staff safer, whether you agree or disagree with that, but that's what their position they want to take. Now you're going to have customers basically saying, take my money. So it's sort of the same position, but the other side now, potentially, if this happens. I wonder if everyone will just drop it, though. That's probably the reality. All businesses will just drop it. We'll be interested to see what happens.
I've certainly seen a lot of businesses, and mainly talking about food, that were good on it eventually stop doing it or not doing it as diligently. So I think it's just kind of they're accepting what's happening anyway, for better or worse.
So Nathan says, what kind of businesses would keep the requirement for vaccine pass after they had been lifted on the 4th? Interested to know you guys' opinions. So let's just put a hypothetical out there. Let's say in Dunedin, because we're, like a quarter to a fifth perhaps of our population is students. Let's say that in Dunedin we had a massive spike, like off the chart spike to any other part of the country. And some businesses wanted, for that reason, to actually have that in place. That might be a reason that people want to do it. I mean, there's dozens of reasons. If someone accepts and believes the science of what Omicron is and how even when vaccinated, you are more protected, but you can still catch it, they might just choose it they want it for whatever kind of business they are. But for whatever reason, if they want to do it, it could be, I can see more conflict coming with that than with actually having the mandate either in place or not. You guys are welcome to answer Nathan's question as well. Or not. We could just...
Yeah, so, I mean, what kind of business would keep a requirement for a vaccine pass? I would think like the ones that you're really in close contact with, like optometrists, barbers, that sort of thing. I think maybe hospitality, maybe that doesn't matter as much. I mean, it's interesting. They're getting their number restrictions dropped down, which is what they've been asking for ages now. Yeah, and I mean, I see another comment there. If your staff are vaxxed, does that not keep them safe? It keeps them safer.
Safer, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's so many anecdotal reports out there of people, you boosted, you still get it. It's just not sending you to hospital. It still takes you out of work.
Well, can I just say, but hang on, before we go on, it's not anecdotal. That's in the research. It's clear. There's clear evidence in the research. So that's it. Yeah, sorry, George.
Yeah, Pat, this is similar to the homosexual law in Australia, right? I'm not really thinking of customers coming into stores, but the Prime Minister was just asked, like, if there was a school board that decided they weren't going to hire people because they didn't have a vaccine pass, like, where does that stand? And she said she was going to have to check that. So it's similar to the conversation yesterday about what businesses can do. Is this, going to be? It sounds like within the new rules, they will be able to not hire someone based on their vaccination status, and that's really, something that, like, for example, the University of Otago throughout this whole couple of years has always taken the Ministry of Health's guidance and then sort of times that by 2. They've always sort of redoubled the restrictions. And, just, and the reason I'm thinking of this is because in my day-to-day sort of life, I'm thinking of colleagues that are no longer around because of their principles on vaccines, all this sort of thing, wondering if they're going to be back in the mix. And this is definitely going to be the sort of tension area, I think, with this easing of restrictions. It's more going to be about, rather than customers coming into places, it's going to be about employment and labour relations.
So you're keeping on listening to the press conference, obviously, for us. So thank you for that, George. That's brilliant, because we're just, we'd listen for 15 minutes for time to get out. So just to reiterate what you're saying, if teacher X applies for a job from school Y and doesn't get hired, and because we're in our business, although business is a interesting term to use about school, all our teachers have to be double vaccinated, then that ends up in court because the Prime Minister, well, not just the Prime Minister, but it's just been said you don't need them unless you want them. So the other thing, just to go back to Nathan's question as well, one point about this, about what kinds of businesses will keep requirements for the vaccine pass. I guess the other thing is it doesn't matter. I mean, if whatever business wants to, for whatever reason, FighterJet also says, what if their staff are immunocompromised, or they have young kids or old family members? I mean, right through this pandemic, we've heard, it doesn't matter why businesses want to make decisions. They're allowed to make them for any reason. And the example about masks, people would say, but we accept no shoes, no shirt, no service. Now it's just no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no service. It's no difference. So what we've been saying all the way through is the business has the right to make this decision because they want to make this decision. So I don't know if there's a type or kind of business that would more lean towards. And I guess especially from the right within politics, they typically support the rights of the business. So now, if there is a business keeping a mandate in when they're allowed to have it off, I hope and I expect to see the David Seymours and Chris Luxons of this world supporting that business for keeping it in place, because it's the right of that business to do it. So that will be an interesting thing to keep an eye on over the next few months as well.
Yeah, does it become a health and safety issue rather than a public health issue at that point? When you're looking at, hey, look, I caught this at work because of my workplace's policies, and now I've got long COVID. Where is that going to leave people? Yeah,
that's interesting, actually, because my was it OSH, Occupation Safety and Health? If you've put me at risk by releasing a mandate and I catch COVID, are you therefore? These are all the questions, and I guess, should the Prime Minister have time for a decent set of journalists to ask questions? Maybe we could, but they're probably getting us. And look, I also want to acknowledge one thing: FighterJet, best name ever, YouTube name. FighterJet, you got it. That's dope. Well done. I'm impressed with that. I looked at it for a second and said, what the fuck? How do I say? Oh, it's FighterJet. Oh, well, I like it.
I have a suspicion that I know FighterJet, or have at least played the same game as him.
Okay. Well, kudos to you. We should do that. Like, I know when we talk to contributors, sometimes we do that. Hey, you've got the best background of the week. That's probably the best best name of the week. And FighterJet comes straight back going, props for pronouncing it right. Well, I do know that PH can be a f. I'm not a PH ucking moron. Okay. What do we look? I'm happy to stay here for a bit longer, but I did want to talk about Chris Luxon's appearance on the AM show this morning. Where are we at, boys? George, is there anything you want to jump in, because you're still listening to the presser there? Is there anything you want to add? Anything we need to put over that we've missed from the Q&A with the journalists there?
No, not from what I could hear. But yeah, I guess just to sort of also, actually, the other one was that there's still going to be health sector corrections, aged care and border workers where there's mandate requirements. Yeah. Yeah, that was the only other thing.
All right, team. Well, I'm a little bit surprised that it's happening as quick as that. But, well, actually, before we do go on, what did you guys think of the pandering at the start? And I'm saying pandering, and I'm being a little bit ungracious to the Prime Minister because there was a lot of, hey guys, we've done really well. We've done so well. And the reason it's been hard is because we've done so well. And haven't we done well? And you guys have done so well. And I think it sucks. And you think it sucks. And everybody thinks it sucks. But, we're all in this together. And ultimately, you guys agreed. And I didn't want it, but you guys wanted it. And I said I didn't want it, but we did it anyway. And now we're taking it off. I mean, all that kind of 15 minutes leading up to it. I know I'm being a little bit facetious and potentially mean, but what are your thoughts?
I'm going to share a tweet here from Ben Thomas. PM running through the patriotic stuff like she's reading out fire safety information for the theatre.
I mean, as you were saying it, I was thinking this is almost a victory lap. I think it made sense. We've had in very recent times some really divisive stuff. You going back to the Parliament occupations and stuff like that. And I haven't really seen too much of her comments after the press conference that happened. But I think, especially with it being literally the same day as 2 years ago, I can see why she would want to cover off everything that we've done, because as she also said, people are tired. I remember seeing a tweet of someone going, cool, February 2022, the 15th year of the 2 months of COVID or something like that. It's been long and people are fatigued by the whole thing. Sometimes it's good to have someone say, hey, look, we have all been working really hard and we have done all of this. But yeah, I can acknowledge how that sort of thing would also rub some people the wrong way.
I think it's that it's not that it's not appropriate to cover it off on the day you're going to be releasing. It's like, I'm sure on, was it called V-Day, Victory Day in World War II, whatever, they the speech that was leading up to it wasn't just, hey guys, it's over. And, there was a little bit of build up to that. But I think when you're looking at a politician, especially one who's been criticized so heavily in the last few weeks, and I personally, I think unfairly so, but there was a bit of that. Guys, this has been hard for all of us. And, but when the headlines get written after this, just remember to include this part as well, the bit about how we're so great in the OECD. But maybe I'm being here now.
Are we thinking that from the position of being, I guess, politics obsessives? I mean, there were a lot of talk around that when there were daily press conferences, and you saw a lot of political commentators going, I don't need to be lectured by.
I think for me, it's that every press conference till now, it's been data within 60 seconds. So we went to that press conference kind of hoping data within 60 seconds rather than the 14-minute history lesson first. Now, I guess what I'm just saying is is it critical? Maybe it's critical. No, it's not meant to be critical. It's more of an observation. The history lessons. I mean, all of us only wanted to know one thing, really, which was where the vaccines coming off. And that, I think that happened at about 17 minutes past or whatever it was. So, yeah. Anywho, anything else you want to mention on that before we get on to Mr. Luxon?
One thing. I am not going to miss watching certain older people with their really cheap cell phones trying to scan a QR code. The most frustrating thing I've ever seen.
I was manually signing in. I was manually signing in till about a couple of days ago when I finally got a phone that could have the scanner app on it.
All right, guys, we are moving on. Now, this conversation we're about to have now, I feel like we'll probably go over a couple of days, if not weeks. I just contacted, we won't say it doesn't matter who it is, but an MP asking them to come on to talk to us about some of the information we don't really have about this that I think is the information we need. I think, George, you'll agree with that, to actually know exactly what's going on with this. Me and George did a bunch of work before the show looking at the difference between household income and individual income. But we'll get to that shortly. So Christopher Luxon on the AM show this morning, and the first thing I got to say is props to Ryan Bridge. I mean, we've been critical of Ryan in the past in his apparent desire to, see how far up the right wing's arse he can fit. But he did a great job this morning of pressing Chris Luxon on this issue, and kudos where kudos is needed, and he did well for it. So he asked Christopher Luxon, what is the amount of your income that you should be spending on rent? So that's the question posed to Chris Luxon, and this was the response. We go full screen. This is the response from Chris Luxon.
Well, look, I mean, that's a debate, and is actually a little bit about individual circumstances. What I can tell you is that, rent has gone up, $150 extra per week to rent the same house you had 4 years ago. And a lot of that is a function of, even if you just look in the last year, the government was advised, hey, listen, don't actually extend that bright line test, don't remove interest deductibility because it will lead to higher interest rates. That's what the Inland Revenue Department advised the government to do. And lo and behold, since those two measures have come in place, we've had another $50 added to weekly rent. But there are other things we should be doing, Ryan. We should be able to bring in developers that do
totally. I want to talk about
elements and stuff like that.
Totally.
So we'll pause it there because we do have another clip to play. So that was the first question that Ryan Bridge asked, and I have to be honest. Normally, I'm not a fan of asking John Key or the Prime Minister or whatever, so how much is a 2-litre bottle of milk? And if they can't get it down within like 3 cents of the price, you're out of touch. How much is it to take a bus, one fare from Dunedin Central to? I'm not a fan of that kind of stuff normally. However, in this situation, when you've got a political party coming out and criticizing the government, fair call, that's their job to do it, and saying it's going to be better under them as a proposed body to run the country, it is completely appropriate to say how much better. And actually, if we're saying cost of living is too much, how much better will it be under you? Like that $50 a week rent, how much better will it be when you're in? And I actually don't think, I don't know is an acceptable answer based on what you've been saying they're doing wrong. Like if I come out and I say, my cricket team is so much better than your cricket team and they're going to annihilate you. How much will they beat you by? I don't know. But they will. Yeah, but why is your cricket team better than my cricket team? Well, they just are. What I can assure you though is the other team is worse. But why is yours better? No. Well, but the thing about it is the other team's so much worse. And that's kind of what happens with opposition politics at times. What they do a lot is they point towards how bad the other side are, and they're not often called on to say, well, explain to us how good you will be. And that's what Ryan Bridge did. I'll play the second clip. He got into more detail, did Ryan Bridge, and again, kudos to him for this line of questioning. And he asked specifically how much will rent drop, because Chris Luxon has just cited $50 a week increase. Got that, fine. So how much? You're criticizing them and you're giving them a dollar figure it's increased. So under you, how much will it decrease? Completely appropriate, fair question.
Look, Ryan, I can't tell you that, but what I can tell you is we've got to work much harder at trying to get rent down, and so it's about rental supply. It's about a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, but you've come out quite strongly, haven't you, on housing and particularly the cost of living, and you said that you can do a better job than Labor. So you're telling me you don't even know how much cheaper rent would be for people?
What I'm saying to you, Ryan, is that the essentials across New Zealand, whether it's power, food, rent, everything is going up. It's through the roof. And it's because the government has let inflation take root in this economy.
But you've announced policies though, Chris. How much would those rents come down as a result of them?
Yeah,
Ryan, I can't tell you that. And I'm not.
Why not? Why not? Have you asked economists what impact your policies would have on rents?
All I'm saying to you, Ryan, is there's a number of things that we could be doing to improve rent, as there is a number of
I'm
things.
not going to say any of them, but there's a number.
There is a number of things that we should be doing to improve social and state housing as well.
Totally. I totally understand that. But I think, Chris, that people at home will be wanting to know quite specifically from you, because they've heard a lot from governments of all different colours. They'll be wanting to know quite specifically. So your interest deductibility rules, for example.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. We'll go on. Something that I missed out on, and maybe it's on the other clip we should play it. When asked about the percentage of income, I'm just going to play this again because this is a part of our conversation.
Totally. I want to talk about some of those things, but just coming back to the question, because there's a lot of people now who are looking at you as a potential Prime Minister, And these are people who perhaps were voting for the Labour Party, who are worried about their cost of living, and a good chunk of them are going to be renters. What's a reasonable percentage of your income to be spending on rent, do you think?
Well, look, a lot of people would say, look, it needs to be around, 35%, 40% living costs as a proportion.
So that's just what I wanted to put out there. So because he did settle on a number, and I think that's important to put out there, 35, 40%. Now, I think we can all assume he pulled that number out his ass because 40% is really high. And this is where part of the conversation that we're going to go on with. But first, Chewy, your response to Chris Luxon.
Famously, National, the party of renters. Good to hear that. Look, my whole thing with them talking about the cost of living's up and Labour's doing us all wrong. Cost of living's up globally because we're in the middle of COVID. There's so many things. There's so many factors that affect prices here in New Zealand, and there's only some of them that we can affect. I think if he was to go, hey, look, National's going to come in and we're going to change the cost of living, they would be looking at food. That's something that we can, like a government at a national level could have an impact on. We were talking the other week about the Commerce Commission's recommendations for supermarket competition. We produce a hell of a lot of food and we're paying export prices or above. I saw a tweet this morning of a central London waitress selling iceberg lettuce for 79p, and it was being described as expensive, whereas here it'd be like $4 something. Why is that when we make so much food? Is there something there a government could do? If there is something a government could do, I can't see National doing it.
It's worse than that because we're paying export prices and we're getting not export quality food. I've had cousins and friends and stuff come from Australia looking at the kiwi fruit that we have in our supermarkets, go, what the fuck are those disgusting looking things? Because actually the export quality kiwi fruit gets sent overseas for that dollars, 100%. And then we pay similar sort of prices for tag 1, which is one below that, or even tag 2 fruit and veggies that are kept in this country. So it's even worse than the prices we're paying. It's the prices we're paying for the quality of the product that we're actually getting, which is lesser. I mean, if you own a business, no problems with the idea of you sending the best to the best price. But then when you charge other people the same sort of money for a more inferior product, I do have a problem with that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's Luxon's big thing is that, he was a CEO and he knows business and that sort of thing. Every time I've seen him in an interview, he flounders. And it's platitudes, and these are the things that Jacinda gets criticized for at times, just fluffy language more than anything. But Luxon does it as well. He just comes up with business fluff. When has rent ever gone down?
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point. I think that rent's not going to go down, and I think that what an opposition party does, no matter what color it is they basically do go, this other side is terrible. And again, look, props to Ryan Bridge, although if you have a look, we're not doing it today, at the conversation he had with Andrew Little a bit later in that same show, you can see how gentle he was being with Chris Luxon and how vitriolic he was being with Andrew Little. So, like, he said at the start of that interview, and congratulations on the poll numbers. I'm like, oh, Jesus, here we go again. But in saying all of that, the questions he asked were good. They were appropriate. And I think they've exposed, and I'll just say the kind of hypocrisy and nonsense of an oppositional party rather than necessarily this oppositional party, because they all do it. Let's be honest. And one of the reasons they do it is they don't have to provide policy. They can't make policy. But when you poke the bear and go, if you're going to be so much better, tell us how, they also can't. And what they'll come out saying, and I think it's fair, but it does show the lunacy of how this all works, is, well, we're not going to reveal all that yet. That's what you do in the 3 to 6 months leading up to the election. If we start talking about that stuff now, then they're basically saying the other guys can steal our ideas. But still, to come out of that is one thing. I do want to move this conversation into the second part of what we're talking about with housing. And sure, you haven't been involved in this part yet, but me and George, I don't know if we debated this morning, George, but we certainly had an interesting to and fro about what this all means. So here's the question, and we don't have an answer to this, by the way, right? But look, here in what we're doing in BHN, I'm more than happy to put out questions and thoughts and go hunting for the answers ourselves. Hunting for this answer, we'll probably have someone on, an MP on tomorrow to talk about it. We've already contacted the Māngere Budgeting Services Trust to see if they can help us find out this answer, because so often the devil is in the detail. And before we go into this conversation, I'll give you an idea. When I was working as a talkback host on News Talk ZB, the common belief because of the media was, those migrants who are pushing up the prices of housing and land, they're making the price of housing go through the roof. We only didn't sell internationally. Now, obviously, we haven't had migrants in the last 2 years, and the housing prices have gone through the roof. So that, for a current context, eliminates that issue. But even of the day, and I'm talking 10 years ago, all you needed to do was look at the numbers, and there was something like 1 to 1.5% of sales going to foreign nationals. The other 97, 98, 99% of sales were going to New Zealand citizens. What it basically was, especially in Auckland, was people going, shit, look at all the Asians here buying houses. Look at all these foreign nationals. What it was is actually New Zealand citizens of Asian ancestry, but the racial undertones of that was all these fucking foreign nationals buying the houses. So it actually was a complete lie. It wasn't accurate in the data. It wasn't accurate in the statistics. And it's still not today, as has been proven with 2 years of COVID, with the house prices going up. So I like to get into the numbers and the data to see if what we're being told is accurate. The question I have at the moment is really around the rental crisis and the housing affordability crisis. Now, make this clear. I'm not saying there's not one. I'm saying I want to have a look at the data and see what it is. So what we started today was an in-depth investigation. Hey, George, is that what we're saying? In-depth investigation into how much we're paying to rent our houses. Now, Chris Luxon said, he answered the question, what's an amount of your income to be spending on rent? Now, that says to me, amount of an income says to me an individual's income. However, George has found out through looking around that the world marker, that Goldilocks spot, which is about 30% of your income, is based on household income. Now, the reason we need clarity on that is at the moment in New Zealand, the average salary, so the average income is $58,000. This is 2022, $836, $1,100 a week. Obviously, 30% of that is very different from the current household income, which is $110,451. 30% of the average salary is going to be, $18,000, some around about. 30% of that is going to be $33,000. So that's one of the things we're going to investigate with. But in saying that, based around what Christopher Luxon said this morning, where he talked about 40% of, quote, your income, I've taken that to mean of an individual's income. So if we have a look at this, $1,000, let's call it $1,100 a week, 40% of that's going to be about $440 a week. So now we ask the question, if the average earner is $1,100, that means 40% of that, the average rent would be $440. If we use $440 average a week as rent, do we have a rental crisis? Now, yes, there are places around the country where it's more than that. But in saying that, there are also places around the country where it's less than that. This is recent information on rents in Dunedin, for example. I don't know why I picked Dunedin. It's just a fantastic place to be. I've gone through and I've taken the average house, because we're talking about averages. I've added up all the average houses for 2 and 3 bedroom prices in all these suburbs in Dunedin, and I've divided it by the number of houses there, and it comes out at $390.27. So it appears to me that the average rent in Dunedin is about $390 that's for a 2 or 3 bedroom house. Of course, there's going to be 1 bedroom houses where it might be cheaper. There's going to be 5 bedroom houses where it's going to be more expensive. So that says to me that if this is the case, and if we're talking about individual income, and if we're using that 40% marker, then maybe the solution is to figure out a way to get more people to move to places where rent's already more affordable, rather than figuring out a way to drop house prices and rents where it's already currently not. Maybe that's a solution. So, and if it's based on household income, and it's $33,000 a year, which is over $600, then most places in the country are already at 40%. one more thing before I get off my soapbox. It's not a soapbox because I'm genuinely wanting to find out. Is 40% is also incredibly high. I think, George, you'll agree from our looking around, the OECD and most countries in the world seem to think that 30% is about the Goldilocks. So 30% of income. Now, if that means if it's individuals' income, then yes, in Dunedin it's 39%. Or sorry, 35%. If it's household income, 30% is going to be, as I said, $33,000 or $600 a week. So there you go. You guys go.
It's definitely household income, because that's what Statistics NZ are basing all these numbers off, and that's the information that politicians are getting. I think that this is why we have to have this conversation that you wanted to have, Pat, is because because politicians will often deploy the facts and logic and the stats, but it's how they're presented and the lack of detail, or how the detail is skewed, that often tells the story, right?
I mean, I've got to say, I've always taken that 30% thing as a personal number.
And do you mean individual when you say personal?
Yeah, individual. Just because from being a student and living in a flat, you don't think about the total. You think about what you're paying. And certainly when I was in Wellington, I would have been up around 50% of my take home. Certainly went on rent. It's part of the reason I'm in Dunedin now.
Yeah, that's the other problem with household income, right? Is it's not telling those sorts of stories. But yeah, 47% of the country is above the 30% thing. And just by the way, 30%, that number is sort of it's from America. It's how the government in America decides if a household is housing cost burdened or not. And it's how universities like Harvard and that sort of thing decide if an area is housing cost burdened. So that's where it's come from, and it seems to be sort of made its way into all sorts of other areas of policy.
So let me just jump back in here for a sec, yeah. And I'm saying because I think this is going to be a few days conversation. We'll probably continue this on tomorrow with some experts, because we're not. If it is household income, and I accept that that's what it is around the world, right? That's what they use around the world. And this is the other thing we wanted to say. If Christopher Luxon is citing 40% as an acceptable amount of income to be spending on housing, right? So that's his number, not the OECD number, right? So that's based on 110,000 there that you're looking at. That's $846 a week. So when I say, is there a housing crisis? What I'm saying is, based on what Christopher Luxon said this morning, 40% at $110,000 income, if that's the numbers we're using, then we don't have a rental issue in New Zealand. Because
if we're happy to base it all on averages of household income.
But that's how we have to do it. We can't talk about individuals here. It's like we talked about the other day.
No, but we can talk. We can specify it. We can look at regions. We can.
But what I'm saying, and be really clear, when I say that we don't have an issue in New Zealand, I'm not actually saying that. I'm saying based on these numbers, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean we don't have an issue for individual houses. I'm meaning across the country, looking at the crisis. What Christopher Luxon is saying is, if he's aiming for 40%, then according to the household income, we're already there. Well, actually, it's Christopher Luxon saying, based on 40% and the household income, that there's not an issue. That's the point I'm trying to make, which is why I'm saying he's pulled a number out of his ass, and 40% is too high. And actually, we need to look at the world sort of average, which is 30%, and then we need to figure out, is it 30% of the 110 or 30% of the average amount. So these are the things. And then you're right, George, I don't want to be seen to be some kind of capitalist shill saying everything's fine in housing, because for some people they're struggling massively and it's too expensive for them. But when you're looking at making legislation and you're making a decision for the whole of the country, you do have to, on some level, look at the average for people. Unless, of course, you then go to means testing and go, what's happening in Auckland? How do we provide solutions in Auckland? And as I said, maybe the solution, rather than trying to tamper down rents in Auckland, is figuring out ways to encourage people to go to, maybe not even Hamilton, because that's probably up there, but, you know, Wellington, Dunedin, Tauranga, these sorts of places. Maybe infrastructure, spend on infrastructure, turning these other cities into more attractive places to be and go, would be a good way to help with that, because it'll be a more attractive places for individuals to come and work, for businesses to move to and work. Maybe helping out. I mean, we've got a great port here in Dunedin. Our airport's pretty shit. Maybe those would be the kinds of things that overall would make cost of living better for individuals, rather than, and I'll be honest, what it feels like, this bullshit conversation we always have about housing. When do you really fucking believe at any stage a landlord's going to decrease their rent for any reason? Oh, yeah, my mortgages have just gone up, by the way. My mortgage has just gone down. I'm going to pass it on to the tenant. You know, there'll be some altruistic landlords out there that will do that, but most won't. Most won't. Most will just take that extra profit and put it in their pocket. So
I remember from my renting days, the best you could hope for each year was to not have a rent increase.
Yeah.
Never that it was going down. It'd never go down. Never in a million years. So I think a politician that gets up there and goes, oh, we're going to tackle the cost of living by lowering rents, I think he's dreaming. And
he's dreaming, mate.
If landlords actually believe that, then National haven't got a shit show of getting in. So what's he really talking about? Or is he just saying things that he knows that people are going to like?
Yeah,
and
so this is oppositional politics, right? Now, I've said this for a long, long time. You get to a point in the election cycle where people go, it's time for a change. And it doesn't actually matter why it's time for a change. They just get a vibe that it's time for a change. But what I've always said to people, and this is not in support of the current government at all, but the equal and opposite is also true. It's better the devil you know. Better the devil you know is completely as valid as it's time for a change. But for some reason, voters the world over get sick of a political party for whatever reason, and they then go, let's get some fresh blood in there. And I'll be honest with you, when has the national government ever done anything to help renters and to help make cost of living more affordable for those at the bottom? We didn't even get into the comments that Luxon made the other day about bottom dwelling and bottom dwellers. So, you know, I want us to be honest with and have the information to make our decisions. That's really what it is. And if there is a housing crisis, and I'm saying if, not because I'm being naive, because I kind of think there is, because I hear people talking about it, but I still want to drill into the data and have a look what that's saying versus what everybody in, you know, Mosgill's saying, because their housing prices is too expensive or it's gone up by 80%. Because anecdotal evidence, individual evidence is not necessarily represented in the data. I want to look at the data, and that's what we're going to do about housing. I don't know, maybe over the next 18 months, but certainly we're going to chase this bone for a few days. Happy days.
I think we should leave it there. Yeah. Get an expert on, or a politician who can like magic the data into a crisis or not.
Yeah. I want, we have had an offer of a politician for tomorrow. I won't announce who it is. I've got details here. We'll see what happens, and we might try and find a housing expert or an economist would probably be best, wouldn't it?
You know who would be
the economists want to get paid to come on. That's because they're economists.
It'd be good to talk to the person that had National's housing portfolio. Is it Nicola?
Yeah,
with the new leader.
Yeah,
it'd be interesting to hear what her point of view was on it.
Yeah. All right, team. Listen, thanks. We were going to talk today a bit about media and how we consume it, to do with, you know, the cost of things. The cost of Sky TV went up yesterday, and that's not a big story in and of itself, but it did lead us to think about, you know, what does that mean moving forward? How do people consume their media? What are people prepared to pay for their media? So if you've seen the thumbnail and you saw that, then I apologize. Jacinda's 15-minute history lesson put us back a bit today, which is fine, because it means that perhaps tomorrow, that we had a couple of interviews requests for that weren't available today. Maybe they'll be available tomorrow or Friday, and we'll delve into that a bit deeper. Cool. Hey, Chewy, thanks for jumping in, mate. I appreciate you.
Worries.
I appreciate you being with us today. How do you feel, honestly, about being in retail and in, let's say, 10 days from now, having people wander in and out without wearing masks on. How do you feel about that sitting there today?
A little bit nervous, to be honest. I mean, I've been saying for weeks now, I don't care what the government's position on mask wearing is. I'm going to be wearing a mask for many months to come. I'm sure, and I hate it. I've got this underneath it. It sucks. But I don't want it. I don't want long COVID. I don't want to give it to anybody. But I need to do everything that I can to keep myself and my customers safe. That's why I am vaxxed and boosted. That's why I'm going to wear my mask. And I just hope that the majority of people out there will share my point of view. And I know that there's always been assholes, and there will be assholes going forward. I hope that some of the more nasty ones don't take this as a victory lap.
Oh, it's unquestionable. I mean, we've got those lunatics in the octagon right now. They're going to be taking credit for the vaccine mandates coming off. And you know, I was going to say there's nothing they've done that's contributed to it, but actually, to be honest with you, I feel like the announcement's probably a couple of weeks earlier than it would have. So maybe that external pressure has done something to get them to release it a little bit earlier. Maybe, I don't know. But certainly the vaccines were always going to come off. And I think it's probably quite good that they haven't come off close to that Wellington, the Wellington protest. Yes, but there certainly will be some victory laps going around today with various media outlets that like to spin various counter points out there, if you know what I'm saying. All right, George. Hey, continued getting better and feeling well, George. Hopefully, listen, dude, if you need any rat tests, let me know, because we've got a few extra boxes lying around here. I'll come drop one off to your letterbox. Chewy, I guess we'll hopefully maybe catch you next week.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
Jumping in today, and for everyone being involved, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone joining, and I see George has written in there to thanks everyone who's commented. And we will be back tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. At some stage this week, I don't know if this is booked yet, George, we're looking to speak to someone who is choosing to travel to the Ukraine and take up a rifle.
Yeah.
So that's going to come up at some stage this week. We've also had confirmation from Michael Baker that he could be available Thursday or Friday, so we'll probably have that this week. And we're going to chase this story about housing as well, and actually the story about how we consume our media. So actually got quite a lot coming up in the next couple of days. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Hey, Root.